Hi, welcome back. Today I'm testing these new colored mechanical pencils by Four Candies by drawing a vibrant and eye-catching lily flower. So let's get started. As always, these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this A3 size paper from my toned grey mixed media paper pad, and the drawing portion area is 9 x 11 inches. I drew the outline using the grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making the grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Okay, so let's start the shading process, and firstly I am picking up these colors randomly that look closest to the colors in the reference image. These mechanical colors by Four Candies come with the swatch card, so now let's swatch the shades we have selected and label them with their shade number. Now that all the separated shades have been swatched, I am picking and marking the ones that are the closest match to the shades of our reference image. Before starting the shading process, I am erasing the outline and the grid so that the graphite doesn't peek through the future layers of the colors. Now let's pick up the white color and start outlining the top petal of the flower. I am maintaining a low angle on my color to achieve a sharp edge on the outer side and smooth on the inner side. This will help us in achieving a smooth transition of colors. Now pick up the pink 11 shade and start shading the petal, keeping the pressure variable. I am applying higher pressure for the darker areas and then reducing it to achieve the lighter tones. I am also adding these strokes in between the shading process to mimic the texture of the petals. I was experimenting with the layering order and techniques in this petal, so you can skip this for now and follow the method I will use to shade the rest of the petals. Or you can follow the steps I'm doing and learn through the process. It is totally up to you. Okay, so grab the peach 10 shade and start layering it over the previous layer. This will create the perfect blend of the shade that is required for the base here. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outline and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials, and you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks. So you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. It has always been my goal to provide free tutorials and information on drawing and art-related tools to the general public. And keeping with that theme, I like to thank all these incredible individuals who backed our channel on Patreon last month. Their generous support enabled me to produce this free tutorial for all of you guys. Okay, so now let's blend this layer, and for that I'm using my blender pencil and going over the petal. I'm keeping the pressure on my pencil very low and using small back and forth along with circular motions to achieve a blended base. And look how blended the base layer has started to look, just like the way we needed here. After blending, the base has started to look a bit dull to me. So I'm adding another layer of reddish pink 12 color over the required portions, keeping the pressure high. Okay, so now it's time to add the contrast, and for that I'm using black 70 color and shading the areas that are darker in the reference image. I'm also adding these textural strokes to create a 3D effect. Keep on building the shade layer by layer to achieve a dark yet smooth effect. Now it's time to blend this layer, and I picked up the cotton bud and started going over the area. These color pencils are wax based, and when I'm blending it using a cotton bud, it removes the upper layers, making the area look dull instead of blending it. So I am again going over the darker area using the black shade to achieve the required darkness. And to blend the edges, I'm using reddish pink 12 color and keeping the pressure relatively low. You can use gray 66 instead of black, and then top it off with a reddish pink shade to achieve a more vibrant look. Now let's fine tune the edges and texture using the white color, and look how the petal has started to look realistic. Okay, so let's move on to the rest of the petals, and I'm firstly filling in all the darker portions with a red 10 color. I'm keeping the pressure on my pencil variable and layering more color with higher pressure on darker areas, and then gradually decreasing it to achieve a soft base without any harsh lines or strokes. For my ease, I'm defining the outline of the darker side first using the same color and then shading the rest of the petal. Keep on filling the petals using the red 10 shade, but don't forget to maintain variable pressure to achieve a 3D base. I'm filling all the teeny tiny areas of the petals that must have red shade in them. I'm also adding these textural strokes on the bottom leaf to mimic the natural look of the flower. As I have added a red base in almost all the petals, so now let's add the rest of the shades, and for that I'm firstly going over the edge using a white color and then layering white over the lighter top portion of the petal. Okay, so now it's time to add the tint of pink to the petal, and for that I'm using pink 11 color and going over the whole petal and then blending it using a blender pencil to achieve a smooth base. Now that we have achieved a smooth base, it's time to add the darker texture, and for that I'm using my black color. Now I'm using a reddish pink 12 shade and going over the black portion to add the required tint of red to it. Let's blend this layer using a blender pencil, but make sure to use lighter pressure to avoid patchiness. You can always go back and adjust the details just like the way I'm doing here. Okay, so let's move on to the next petal, and I'm firstly blending the red shade using a blender pencil. And now adding the white on the top portion of the petal, just like the way I did earlier for the previous petal. I'm also shading this tiny portion of the leaf using the black 70 and yellow 18 color. Now it's time to layer pink over the petal, and I'm using relatively higher pressure on my pencil this time. This will blend the previous layers along with embedding the color in its place. I'm adding the tint of pink in all remaining petals to speed up the process. Just make sure to use higher pressure on the darker areas, and you can gradually decrease it while working on relatively lighter ones. Now it's time to add the white, and I'm following the similar method of going over the lighter areas on the top of the petal. The only difference is that I'm also adding these lighter textural lines and strokes in between the darker ones to give a 3D effect to the petals. Just keep on relating to the reference image while adding these textural lines to mimic the natural look of the flower. Keep on layering the white color and flick your pencil towards the bottom of the petals, and you will achieve the required faded lines with softer ends. Okay, so now it's time to add the contrast and darker texture to the petals, and for that I'm using my black color. I'm following the similar method of going over the darker portions by keeping the pressure variable. Don't apply too much pressure on the color, instead build the required depth layer by layer to save the tooth of the paper. I'm going over some of the areas to add the tint of pink, and it will also blend the specific portion. Some of the areas are looking a bit rough to me, so I'm going over them with my blender pencil to achieve a smooth effect. Keep on adding the darker texture and contrast for the rest of the petals as well. And don't forget to add the tint of pink and use a blender pencil to blend the areas where required to achieve a softer look of the petals. The petal on the front look a bit dull to me, so I'm firstly adjusting its shade using my reddish pink 12 color, and then using a blender pencil to blend the rough and patchy areas. You can always go back and forth with your tools and shade the area until you achieve the required texture. The edge of this petal is looking a bit less defined and smudged to me, so I'm using my electric eraser to define its shape first, and then shading it to achieve the required look of the edge. Now it's time to add the contrast, and you will see how contrasts will bring this petal to life in just a few minutes. Keep on relating to the reference image to make sure you are on the right track, and add the details accordingly. Okay, so before moving on to the detailing of stamens, I'm cleaning the spill of the colors using my sharp tip electric eraser. You can skip this step if your drawing is looking fine. Okay, so now let's firstly add the base layer using the peach 18 color. I'm keeping the pressure high on my pencil to achieve the required dense base. Now grab green 48 color and start adding the green shade right beside the peach one. Also notice that I'm applying higher pressure to achieve dense shade and then reducing it to create a softer edge. Now to add the contrast, I'm using gray 66 and going over the areas which are darker in the reference image. Okay, so almost all the layers are in place. Now it's time to blend them. And as always, I'm using my blender pencil for this purpose. I'm only going over the stem end portion to avoid smudging the shades over the petals. After blending, the darker details look dull to me, so I am adjusting them using a black color. I am also adding a tint of red on the bottom portion using a red 10 color. Now it's time to fill the anthers with the peach 18 color, and I'm maintaining a variable pressure to achieve the required base. Okay, so as the base is done, now I'm using my black color to shade and define the proper shape of them. And look how beautiful they have started to look. I'm adding some final touches to the flower before moving on to the leaves and stem portion. Okay, so let's move on to the stem portion, and I'm firstly filling it with green 46 color. I'm maintaining higher pressure to define the right edge of the stem and then reducing it to shade the rest of it. Now let's blend it, and as always I'm using my blender pencil for this purpose. And for the contrast, I'm adding this darker layer on the left side of the stem using my black color. Also notice that I'm keeping the pressure high on my color to achieve a darker layer. Okay, so now let's shade the leaves behind the flower petals, and I'm following the similar method of layering green first and then adding the required contrast using a black color. Okay, so let's move on to the next leaves, and I'm firstly using green 46 color and filling the petals, just like the way I have done earlier. The only difference here is that I'm also adding a layer of dark green 48 over the shadowed portions of the leaf to achieve a 3D base. I'm repeating the similar process for the next leaf as well. Okay, so now it's time to add the contrast, and I'm going over the left side of the leaves with black color and keeping the pressure high in the start, and then gradually decreasing it as I move towards the right to create a perfect gradient without any harsh edge. When you are done with the contrast, start blending it using a blender pencil. I'm also adjusting the darker and lighter details in between the blending process to achieve the required shade. This leaf has a light texture on the top portion, so I'm adding these slightly curved strokes using a white color. And with this last step, we are done with this super easy lily drawing. Creating these free tutorials needs a significant amount of time and energy. So if you found this one valuable, please show your support by liking the video. Your support keeps me inspired to bring you more creative content. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.